Our analysis continues. Kwame Owino, economist at the Institute for Economic Affairs, joins me now. Kwame, thank you very much for making time for us here today. I would just like to start by, asking, now that we've heard the full detail of it, of the budget that has been presented this afternoon. It's been touted as building back better, as COVID-19 recovery, and that was supposed to be heavy on SMEs, which, are the drivers of Kenya's economy. From what you've heard today, does it meet all of those intentions of the government?
Maybe it's too much to have all those expectations under the circumstances of, obviously, with the debt overhang and all that. So I think it's okay to accept that it's far more modest in terms of its the ambitions are huge, but perhaps the way the money has been distributed shows that there are significant constraints. So I guess...
and so with some of the spending priorities, from what you've seen, does that, is it matching the talk? Are they walking the talk with that in some of the areas in which they have made certain allocations?
Well, the way the budgeting problem in Kenya has become a structural problem. So the way there's very little flexibility because they want to make the difficult decisions. So what you do is you get an extra 600 billion and then you spray them around, you give this to COVID recovery, this for vaccination and all that. But structurally the budget is still very stiff. And what it means is just you have that incremental thing. So for instance, we have the commitment this year, and the cabinet secretary stated that before the end of this financial year, all pending bills should have been paid. We know with 2 weeks to go, I think that's too ambitious. So
because how much is that with the pending bills?
Well, the amount that has been provided for the payment of pending bills is closer to 90 billion or thereabouts. But that's for the next financial year.
Right.
So this year's pending bills obviously will definitely be pushed into this. So I think part of it is the structural problems of budget execution can be solved outside just allocating more money and that.
So a little bit more than allocating. So what would that mean? What would that look like?
So for instance, I think it's true. The cabinet secretary says that there'll be an additional 7 billion for buying vaccination.
Yes.
I don't think that that'll be enough. Unless it's not being communicated, but the idea has been to just basically vaccinate 30% of the population and then let the rest of us tough it out. I suspect that's what the decision is, but it's not being claimed. So let younger people take the risks. If we cover the people at risk and everybody else, then let younger people have to tough it out by doing that. The problem with that is that if you get ill of COVID today, if you're able to get insurance, that's fine, but it'll be capped.
Yeah.
But if you're ill, I think doctors today know enough to be able to pull you back. But it'll leave you with a bill of not less than $1 million.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's actually passing back. Instead of the public health, it's passing back that to younger people and actually having private people bear that, the cost of that.
I see. And perhaps one could read into, the speech, considering the number of times he talked about the exemptions, the stimulus package, the Kazi Mtaani program. He made reference to these, quite a few times. Perhaps, to give some excitement and some hope to Kenyans. Did you read the same hope and optimism in the budget?
Yes, let's see, the cabinet secretary tries his best to actually show that through this budget we are trying to cater for everybody. But that's a problem. The function of budgeting or distributing resources is not to make sure that everybody gets a little bit of something. The function of budgeting is to ensure that the priority sectors that lift as many people as is possible go. But as you can see, education certainly has a broadening effect. Devolution has a broadening effect. But if you're spending only on security, and I'm not saying we don't need security, but you're spending on security as if we are a country at war. We are not. So we need to actually unpack that budget and ask, what is it that we are spending on? Looking at the budget back at the Institute of Economic Affairs, we realized as well that while we have a co-establishment in the public sector, the amount of money that's being spent on consultants, even right at the treasury itself, is something the cabinet secretary should answer. Billions of shillings. It's not cheap. It's not change. So obviously, unless that structure changes, I think what it means is that every time we have a new emergency, there'll be no adjustment, but you actually have to go for more taxes and basically expand that deficit. So that deficit is what keeps us awake at the Institute of Economic Affairs, regardless of where else some money is sprayed.
Right. There was quite a few views from various other economists who said there was a lot of things we've heard before in this one, you know, austerity, pending bills that you talked about, fiscal consolidation. And speaking on the issue of pending bills, I mean, you know, like you said, that was raised today. But remember, this is something, I think, back in 2019, I believe, on a public holiday, when the president said, you know, gave government 30 days to do so. And now we hear it here again. And in fact, you know, coming with certain conditions and ultimatums to county governments to make sure they get their affairs in order, or they will not get all of their money. The irony is, Kwame, that, you know, there's been delay in disbursement to counties to begin with. For you, what were some of these things you've heard before? Was there anything you heard in this budget that, you know, was new or novel, or said that there was a shift in the thinking and the structure of the budget? Nothing, to be honest.
As I said, it's business as usual. So you get additional money and you structure it out. Of course, he conceded that we had an IMF program, and he says that that will stabilize public finances and make it safer so there's no reason to doubt that there's a crash. I think he overstates that. The risk of a crash is still real. But the rest of what happened is that if the largest single item in budget spending is still debt payments, we're in trouble, regardless of what else we say.
And so how do we get ourselves out of this trouble? And it's a double-sided question, if you like, because it's my final one. How do we get ourselves out of this? Because it looks like we're just sort of digging deeper, and we're deeper in debt. And the question then is, this is President Uhuru Kenyatta's final budget. The next one, he will be out of office in about a month or two after that. So what does this say in terms of his legacy, you know, when it comes to the economy?
Okay, let me start with the idea that the debt distress that Kenya is facing, it's not new. I mean, globally, many countries run into it. And what it tells you is that you usually require 3 to 5 year plans, sometimes as much as a decade. So whoever is coming after President Uhuru will need to have a plan that succeeds this as well. The idea, and part of it is, let's give credit, the Treasury is getting it right. By going to the IMF and obviously the multilateral lenders, what is doing is stretching the tenure of debt. Okay. So you have money from the IMF and the World Bank, for instance. You have a 5-year grace period, and then you pay over 30 years. That's very, very, very kind lending, as opposed to our friends from the East, and the commercial guys. So obviously that allows you to buy some breathing space so that you do not suffocate the budget by just debt payments. So I think but I think the quantum of money that is owed to commercial lenders is so high that this just buys us little space. So what should have happened is, of course, COVID might not allow for it, is actually to cap some expenditures in some certain places and then buy some breathing space over time for the economy to grow, so that debt as a share of our total GDP is much lower. But right now, we're actually chasing one form of payment by borrowing here to pay the others. That's not very safe.
All right. And the president's legacy, and I guess this entire administration, I guess this is it, right? From 2013, you know, to the final date is in office. Your thoughts on that with this last budget?
Well, I think the president is as a deliberate. People think that it's not planned. It's a deliberate legacy on the Jubilee administration to actually build a lot of infrastructure. Whether it's stadiums, whether it's roads, whether it's overpasses, whether it's expansion of the port, and you can tell as well. So it's very deliberate. Members of parliament already know that we have 9 trillion shillings worth, which is 3 years equivalent of budgets, worth of stalled projects. Not all of them are going well. They're not paying for themselves. So the legacy will be a lot of white elephants for which President Uhuru will have to take responsibility. And historians and economic historians will write that on his account when the time comes to write it.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Kwame Owino, who's an economist with the Institute for Economic Affairs. We thank you for your time, you know, with us here, and you've been with us for quite a few days on this one. Just